America's biggest World War II tank, the M26 Pershing, a story of fear, fire, and redemption. The winter of 1945 came with a silence so heavy it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Europe was dying. Germany, cornered and desperate, was lashing out with everything it had left. And the United States Army, stretched thin across 2 continents, found itself staring at an uncomfortable, terrifying truth. The tanks it had relied on for 3 years of war were no longer enough. The M4 Sherman. That faithful steel workhorse that had fought across the deserts of North Africa, the mountains of Italy, and the hedgerows of France. It had carried American soldiers through thousands of miles of combat. Reliable. Mass-produced. Available in numbers that no enemy could match. But on the frozen killing grounds of the Western Front, none of that mattered anymore. Because the Sherman had met its match. And the names whispered by terrified American tank crews, men barely old enough to drink, were always the same. Panther. Tiger. King Tiger. Machines forged not merely as weapons of war, but as symbols of a regime that believed fear itself was a kind of victory. In those cold, desperate months, a story began that would rewrite American armored history. It wouldn't happen in a congressional hearing room. It wouldn't happen in a general's office or on an engineer's drafting table. It would happen in the flames of battle. Where young men, far from home, begged for just one thing, a fighting chance. And when their message finally reached the top brass, it came not as a memo or a report, but as a warning carved in blood and fire. Our tanks are dying. And so are we. But the story of America's biggest tank in World War II does not begin on a battlefield in 1945. It begins 3 years earlier, in 1942, inside a quiet office in the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. That's where a frustrated engineer sat surrounded by prototypes, blueprints, technical drawings, and dreams that had been repeatedly rejected by committees who believed, with absolute conviction, that American warfare did not need heavy armor. At that time, the United States Army clung to a very specific doctrine. A doctrine that had been shaped by the lessons of World War I, by theories about mobile warfare, and by the belief that the next war would be won by speed and maneuverability, not by brute force. The doctrine was simple: tanks were for infantry support. They were not meant to fight other tanks. That job belonged to tank destroyers, lightly armored, fast vehicles with powerful guns. The tank's job was to support the infantry, break through defensive lines, and exploit breakthroughs. Infantry first. Armor second. Mobility mattered more than protection. Speed mattered more than gun size. And for a while, for those early years of American involvement in the war, that doctrine seemed to work. The Sherman was perfect for this role. It was fast. It was reliable. It was easy to produce. It could be shipped across oceans, maintained in the field with basic tools, and crewed by soldiers with relatively little training. General George S. Patton loved them. He raced across France with entire divisions of Shermans, exploiting German weaknesses, encircling enemy positions, capturing territory at speeds that seemed impossible. But there was a problem that kept growing larger. A problem that American commanders tried to ignore. A problem that tank crews knew all too well. By 1944, the Sherman's 75mm gun was nearly useless against the Panther's front armor. Crews watched in horror as their shells bounced off German tanks like pebbles thrown at a fortress wall. The sound of a shell ricocheting off enemy armor became the soundtrack of their nightmares. Meanwhile, German 88mm cannons, the same guns used in Tigers and Panthers, could penetrate a Sherman's armor from over a mile away. From distances where American crews couldn't even see what was killing them. The Sherman was fast. The Sherman was reliable. But reliability meant nothing when the young soldiers inside never came home. When their families received letters that began with the words every mother dreaded, "We regret to inform you." The crews knew. God, they knew. They invented dark jokes to cope with the fear. They called the Sherman the Ronson, because it lights first time, every time, just like the cigarette lighter advertisement. Some called it the Tommy Cooker. British crews called it the Brewing Up Special. They wrote letters home that censors wouldn't allow to be sent. Letters that said things like, "Mom, I'm scared every time we roll out. The Germans have tanks we can't kill. We hit them and nothing happens. They hit us once and we burn. We're supposed to fight them 5-1. 5 Shermans to kill 1 Panther. That means 4 of us die so 1 can get a side shot. Who decides which 4? Back at Aberdeen, engineers knew this was coming. They had seen the intelligence reports about German tank development. They had studied captured panzers. They had done the math. And they had been begging, pleading, since 1942 to build a new heavy tank. one with thicker armor, a wider turret ring, a more powerful engine, and most importantly, a devastating 90mm gun that could punch through German steel at the ranges where combat actually happened. The design was ready. The technology existed. American industry was the most powerful in the world. If anyone could build it, the United States could. But each time the proposal reached the desks of senior commanders, they were told the same thing. Not necessary. Too heavy. Won't be transportable. We need quantity, not quality. The Sherman is good enough. As casualties mounted. As tank crews wrote letters home saying they felt like lambs being sent to slaughter. As American forces pushed deeper into France, closer to Germany, closer to the heart of the Reich where the heaviest German armor waited. The cries for help grew louder. And finally, in December 1944, the dam broke. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. Belgium. In the grey dawn of a winter morning, the German army launched the largest offensive it would mount in the entire Western Front campaign. Operation Wattam Rhine. The world would come to know it as the Battle of the Bulge. Through the snow and fog came an armored spearhead the Americans weren't prepared for. Not just Panzer IVs, but Panthers, Tigers, and the massive King Tigers. The heaviest, most powerful tanks Germany had ever produced, many of them crewed by experienced veterans who had been held in reserve for this exact moment. American forces were caught completely off guard. Entire units were surrounded. Supply lines were cut. And as German armor smashed through defensive positions, American tank crews found themselves in the nightmare scenario they had dreaded for months. They were facing superior German tanks. In winter conditions. With limited visibility. In terrain that favored the defender. And they were being destroyed. The stories that came back from the Bulge were horrifying. Sherman crews described firing shot after shot at Panthers, watching every single round bounce off. Then seeing the Panthers' turrets slowly traverse toward them, knowing what was coming, knowing they had seconds to either run or die. Some crews abandoned their tanks before even engaging. It wasn't cowardice, it was the rational calculation that fighting was suicide. One Sherman commander later wrote, "We ambushed a Panther at a crossroads. 3 of our tanks. We had the perfect setup. We fired first from less than 300 yards. All 3 shots bounced. The Panther didn't even seem concerned. It calmly rotated its turret and killed all 3 of us in less than a minute. I was the only one who got out." Another described watching a Tiger shrug off 7 direct hits from 5 different Shermans, then methodically destroy each one. It was like watching someone swat flies. We weren't even a threat. We were just targets. The reports reaching Allied headquarters were increasingly desperate. American armor wasn't just being defeated, it was being annihilated. The carefully calculated 5-to-1 exchange ratio that planners had accepted as the cost of doing business didn't work when crews were too terrified to close to effective range. Tank destroyers, those lightly armored vehicles that were supposed to handle German armor, were being knocked out before they could get into position. Their lack of turrets made them vulnerable. Their thin armor meant any hit was catastrophic. The American army was learning a lesson written in fire and blood. You cannot fight a tank war with a doctrine that pretends tanks don't fight tanks. The messages reaching Washington became impossible to ignore. From Patton, "We need better tanks. Immediately." From Bradley, "Our armor is outclassed in every engagement." From field commanders whose names would never make history books, "My men are dying in tanks that can't protect them. How many more have to burn before we do something?" And finally, the decision was made. There was a heavy tank design that had been sitting in development hell for 2 years. A tank that weighed 46 tons. A tank with armor thick enough to stop an 88mm shell. A tank with a 90mm gun that could kill any German tank it faced. The T-26 prototype. Renamed for production as the M26. The US Army had delayed it, criticized it, called it unnecessary. But now, with the snow of the Ardennes stained red with American blood, with hundreds of burnt-out Shermans marking the path of German advance, there was no more debate. The order went out: produce it. Ship it. Get it to Europe. Now. And in early February 1945, as the Battle of the Bulge finally ended in Allied victory, a costly, brutal, Pyrrhic victory, the first M26 Pershing heavy tanks arrived in Europe. The beast had been awakened. Too late for Normandy. Too late for the thousands who had already died. But not too late for Germany. And that is where the legend of America's biggest tank in World War II would be written. On a cold February morning, a group of American tankers gathered in a rail yard near the front lines. They had been told they were getting new tanks. Something different. Something better. They weren't prepared for what rolled off those transport trains. The M26 Pershing was massive. Compared to the Sherman, it looked like a different species of machine. It sat lower to the ground, its hull wider and more angular. The turret was enormous, it had to be, to accommodate that 90mm gun. The armor was visibly thicker, sloped at aggressive angles designed to deflect incoming fire. It weighed 46 tons, nearly twice the weight of a Sherman. Some soldiers touched the armor like they were touching something holy. Like it was a myth made real. Some just stared silently, calculating what it would have meant to have had this 6 months earlier. How many friends might still be alive? One soldier, a sergeant who had survived the bulge in a Sherman, simply whispered, "Finally." The crews that were selected to receive the first Pershings were the most experienced tankers available. Men who had fought through France, survived the bulge, men who knew exactly what they were up against and exactly what this new tank meant. They had to be trained quickly. The Pershing wasn't just bigger, it handled differently. The gun had different ballistics. The armor, while much thicker, meant the tank was slower than the Sherman. Not ponderous, but deliberate. It wasn't built to race across France. It was built to go toe-to-toe with German heavy armor and win. The first Pershing to see combat was nicknamed Fireball. It was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, to a crew commanded by Sergeant Nick Mashlonik. They were veterans. They knew what they were doing. And they knew they were about to make history. Their moment came in the shattered ruins of Elsdorf, Germany, on February 27, 1945. American forces were pushing into Germany itself now. Every town was contested. Every street was a potential ambush. And German armor, though increasingly outnumbered, was still deadly when properly positioned. Intelligence reports indicated that a German heavy tank, a Tiger, was dug in somewhere in Elsdorf. It had already killed several American vehicles. Sherman crews refused to advance until the Tiger was dealt with. That's when Fireball rolled forward. The town was a nightmare of broken buildings, collapsed walls, and debris-choked streets. Perfect terrain for an ambush. The kind of place where a Sherman crew would be scanning every shadow, every window, every pile of rubble, knowing that death could come from any direction. But the Pershing crew felt something they hadn't felt in months. Confidence. They found the Tiger exactly where intelligence said it would be. Positioned perfectly. Hull down behind rubble. Its long 88mm gun aimed down a street littered with the burned skeletons of vehicles that had died trying to pass. The Tiger crew saw the Pershing coming. And they fired first. The 88mm shell hit Fireball's front armor with the sound of thunder. Inside the tank, the crew felt the massive shockwave. For a split second, they didn't know if they were dead or alive. Then they realized, the armor had held. The shell had bounced off. For the first time in the war, American tankers had been hit by an 88mm gun and survived. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. They weren't helpless anymore. They had a chance. The gunner, Corporal Clarence Smoyer, centered his crosshairs on the Tiger's turret. His hands were steady. He had trained for this. He had waited for this. For every friend who had died in a Sherman. For every crew that never had a fighting chance. He exhaled once. And squeezed the trigger. The 90mm cannon roared. The entire tank rocked back from the recoil. The armor-piercing shell left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second. It hit the Tiger's turret with devastating force. The shell punched through the Tiger's armor like it was paper. Inside the German tank, the shell exploded. Ammunition cooked off. Fire burst from every hatch and viewport. The massive turret was lifted partially off its ring by the force of internal explosions. When the smoke cleared, the Tiger was a blackened, burning corpse. Its crew was gone. And the battlefield was silent. The message spread through the ranks like wildfire. The Pershing killed the Tiger with one shot. One shot. After years of bouncing shells off German armor. After years of needing 5 Shermans to kill one Panther. After years of feeling helpless. One shot. The psychological shift was immediate and dramatic. Where once American tankers approached battle with dread, where crews sometimes had to be ordered at gunpoint to advance against known German armor positions, now they rolled forward with something they hadn't felt in months. Hope. And more than hope, confidence. The playing field hadn't just been leveled. For the first time, American tank crews felt like they had the advantage. As more Pershings arrived in Europe, they began appearing in the most intense battles of the war's final months. They were still few in number, only about 20 would see real combat before Germany's surrender. But wherever they appeared, they changed the rhythm of the fight. Cologne. The Remagen Bridge. The Ruhr Pocket. The final push to the Elbe River. But the most iconic moment, the moment that would be captured accidentally on film and become legendary, came in the heart of Cologne, near the massive cathedral that dominated the city's skyline. March 6, 1945. American forces were fighting street by street through Cologne, one of Germany's largest cities. The ruins provided perfect cover for German defenders. Every intersection was a death trap. Every square a killing ground. And in the plaza near the cathedral, a German Panther was waiting. The Panther was positioned perfectly. Its long 75mm gun covered the approaches to the cathedral. Its crew were experienced. They had fought on the Eastern Front, survived battles where entire tank divisions were destroyed. They knew their business. An American Sherman attempted to cross the plaza. The Panther fired once. The Sherman exploded into flames. Ammunition cooked off. Fire towered into the sky. 3 young men died instantly. The rest of the American column halted. No one wanted to be next. The Panther's position was too good. Its armor too strong. Its gun too accurate. This was exactly the scenario that had killed so many Sherman crews, facing a well-positioned German heavy tank with no good options. But this time, something was different. This time, there was a Pershing in the column. Through the smoke of the burning Sherman, another shape emerged. Wider. Lower. More aggressive. The distinctive silhouette of an M26 Pershing. The tank paused at the edge of the plaza. Inside, the crew was making calculations. Range. Angle. Position. The gunner was lining up the shot. The commander was spotting for threats. On the German side, the Panther crew saw the Pershing. They recognized it. Intelligence reports had warned about the new American heavy tank. They knew this wasn't a Sherman. This was different. This was dangerous. The Panther's turret began to traverse. Both tanks knew, whoever fired first and hit would probably win. The Pershing fired first. The 90mm armor-piercing shell crossed the plaza in a fraction of a second. It hit the Panther's turret with catastrophic force. The shell penetrated the armor and exploded inside. The Panther's ammunition detonated. Fire burst from every opening, hatches, viewports, gun mantlet. The explosion was so violent that the turret nearly lifted off its ring. The 45-ton tank actually rolled backward from the force of internal explosions. And the entire thing was captured on film by a combat cameraman who happened to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. That footage became legendary. It was shown in movie theaters across America. It was used in training films. It became the defining image of American armor in the final months of the war. It wasn't just a recording of a tank battle. It was a declaration. A message to every American tanker who had lost a friend to a Panther or a Tiger. A message to every crew that had fought knowing they were outgunned. The message was simple: the playing field has been leveled. We can fight now. We can win. As the war entered its final weeks, Pershings led the American advance deeper into Germany. Their tracks crushed the last defensive lines. Their cannons silenced bunkers and strongpoints. Their armor saved crews who would have died in Shermans. They fought at Remagen, where American forces captured the Ludendorff Bridge intact and established a critical bridgehead across the Rhine. Pershings were among the first tanks across, defending the bridgehead against desperate German counterattacks. They fought in the Ruhr Pocket, where the last major German army in the west was surrounded and destroyed. They fought all the way to the Elbe River, where American and Soviet forces would finally meet. But the Pershing story was not just about victory. For every triumph, there were still moments of fear. Still breakdowns in the field. Still cold nights inside steel armor. Still young men wrestling with the reality of war. The crews gave their tanks names. Fireball. Blackjack. Thunderbolt. Eagle 7. As if names could protect them. As if personality could ward off death. They painted symbols on the hulls. Added sandbags for extra protection. Hung pieces of captured German armor as trophies. Each Pershing became more than a machine. It became a home. A guardian. A final chance at survival. And in those final weeks, as Germany collapsed, as the Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years crumbled after just 12, the Pershing crews knew something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. This tank should have been here years ago. How many friends would still be alive if the Pershing had landed at Normandy? How many brothers, sons, fathers would have come home if American doctrine hadn't been so stubborn, so resistant to change, so convinced that the Sherman was good enough? The Pershing was America's best tank in World War II. But it was also America's biggest failure. Because it arrived too late for the men who needed it most. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. Pershing stood in town squares across Germany, their engines rumbling softly, like steel giants watching the end of an era. Their crews climbed out, breathed free air, began the long process of trying to become human again after years of living inside machines designed for killing. In the end, only about 20 M26 Pershings saw combat in the European theater. Out of the 310 that were sent to Europe before the surrender. Out of the thousands that would eventually be produced. 20 tanks. In a war that involved tens of thousands of armored vehicles. But those 20 tanks changed everything. After the war, the Pershing evolved. It became the M46 Patton, named after the general who had loved the Sherman but knew America needed something better. The Patton became the father of an entire generation of American tanks. The M47, the M48, the M60, each one carrying the DNA of the Pershing. Each one shaped by the lessons learned in those final months of World War II. The Pershing's genes lived on in Korea, where M26S and M46 Pattons faced Soviet-built T-34s and proved their worth all over again. They lived on in the Cold War, in the armor doctrine that would shape American military thinking for decades. They live on even today, in the design philosophy that says American tanks should be able to fight any enemy tank on equal terms. That says crew survivability matters. That says firepower and protection are just as important as mobility. The Pershing rewrote American armored doctrine. It proved that the Sherman-era thinking was wrong. It showed that sometimes, you need a bigger hammer. But the legacy of America's biggest tank in World War II was not measured by how many enemy tanks it destroyed. Not by how many battles it won. Not by its technical specifications or its evolutionary impact on tank design. It was measured by what it represented to the men who had lived in fear for too long. It represented hope. Hope that they finally had a chance. Hope that steel could save lives instead of just containing dying boys. Hope that for once, just once, they could fight on equal ground. The M26 Pershing was more than metal. More than engineering. More than a list of specifications and combat statistics. It was a promise delivered late, but delivered all the same. When young men climbed inside its turret and closed the hatch behind them, they didn't just enter a tank. They entered a future where American armor would never again arrive late to the battle. Where doctrine would never again ignore the reality of modern warfare. Where the lives of tank crews would never again be considered an acceptable exchange rate for strategic mobility. The Pershing may have entered World War II in its final chapter. It may have arrived too late to save the thousands who died before it reached the front lines. It may have been the tank that should have been there from the beginning but was held back by bureaucracy, conservatism, and a doctrine that refused to adapt until reality forced its hand. But in that final chapter, it roared. And the echoes of that roar shaped the battles, the doctrines, the machines, and the men that came after it. A giant had woken. Too late for many. But not too late to change everything. The M26 Pershing. America's biggest tank in World War II. And the promise of a future where American soldiers would never again go to war in machines that couldn't protect them.